Again, we don't know any version information. We don't know any more details about this, so we want to get more advanced. So we're going to do a -A for
realistic type room. The content creator boasts that it's based off of pen tests that they found, stuff that they found during pen test, and because of that, you should more realistically learn those type of things. So let's look at the room on TryHackMe. So this is a room. It's kind of a newer room. Um, it's a free room. So again, all you do is you have to have an account and you can sign up and use this room. I already have it started up. It is a challenge room, so it doesn't lead you into um, the specific methods or things that you need to do, and it gives you kind of just a little hint on a foothold. So again, I've worked through this room, and I'm just kind of trying to show people different ways of looking at things and trying to get you through and understand the process of how pen testing is and works, and hopefully that you can pick up some skills to help improve that. Again, everything is ethical up on the up. We have permission to do this type of stuff. So we have a methodology in pen testing, and that methodology follows a certain process. And so the first thing that we do is that we have to scan our room, and we have to scan our IP. So this, again, is an IP that we have permission to scan. So what I like to do is, in order to keep on target, I like to put my IP address into a target's file. And so that this first command basically writes that IP address into targets. And so if we cat that targets file, which is just basically writes out that whatever contents of that file is, you see that there. So for our scanning, what we end up doing is taking Nmap then, and we do an input list. And we'll take targets. We would like to do a -pn, so no ping. On some of the Windows systems, they might not respond to pings. And then we're going to also go ahead and output all formats, and we'll call this init scan. And when that gets kicked off, we'll go ahead and split this window, and we're going to do a more detailed scan just to get that little bit of information. This was very quick, so I can just reuse this window and change some options, but sometimes it takes a little bit longer. So we see only 2 ports open. Again, we don't know any version information. We don't know any more details about this, so we want to get more advanced. So we're going to do a -A for advanced, -big O for OS scanning. Um, Again, we'll put this as detailed. And we're going to go ahead and add scripts. So Nmap has a scripting engine, and what that scripting engine does is it will um, based on the information it gets back from these ports, it'll go ahead and start doing more enumeration and getting more information back from these ports. And that way, you can kind of see what the underlining you know services are and maybe some vulnerabilities and things like that. So I'm writing script default version vuln, and then I'm going to put HTTP star. So this is running every HTTP script that's in the Nmap scripting engine. And then what I like to do is, because some of these scripts will never finish, is put a timeout on them, and we're going to put a timeout of equal 2 minutes. And that should be, let's do a -SV for service version. We'll just put that back up here. So S and then big V, which is covered by versions, but again, it's just to kind of be consistent with things. So we'll go ahead and scan that. That's going to take a little bit. Again, it's gonna ask uh, the system every port that's open within the first 10,000, and then start doing versioning and default script scans and vulnerability scans and stuff like that. So we did see that HTTP is open on this port, and so we'll go ahead and look at that in a web browser here. So when we bring up this page, it's a custom 404 page, and how do I know it's a custom 404 page? Well, we have a harder.corp. This is a banner. You can tell this is a banner if as you hover over things you see stuff. You see a footer. So at the bottom you see that it's powered by PHP-FPM. And then you see the actual main part of the page, 404 nothing here. And so a custom 404 page means that the administrator took time to put this in, did some kind of configuration to kind of make this happen. Um, so we're missing something here. Again, we're trying to find a way to access this website. So our next step usually in more of a CTF environment, sometimes in the real environment, is to kind of use a tool to kind of enumerate directories on this page. And that's where we usually kind of go to GoBuster. And again, your tool of choice could be something different. This is just something I end up usually like using and get good results out of. So we're telling GoBuster that it's going to do a dir. We specify the URL to start on. Then we need to specify a word list. And so we're just specifying the directory buster word list. And this should be in your standard install of Kali. Medium. We're going to do a medium, and then we always like to save our output. You want to get in the habit of saving always your output. This helps you later when you need to retrace your steps or show any proof or anything like that. So we go ahead and kick this off, and we notice that we get an error. The server returns a status code that matches provide options with non-existing rules. And so what GoBuster's trying to do is trying this abnormal directory that shouldn't exist to see if it does give it an error page back. And then if it doesn't, then it lets you know, hey, something's weird here. Are you sure you still want me to go? And if you do, then you need to specify this wildcard switch. Um, and so in this case, then that's probably not the best idea. If this is looking at what we're submitting, this random URL, and it's just given a 200, then what's basically being seen here is this page is not really a 404, which is the equivalent of the web server saying, hey, that page is not here. Instead, what the case is happening is this web server is saying, hey, this page is here. Here's this page. And it's just showing you text that says 404 instead of actually responding with 404. And so HTTP status codes are a way that servers can respond back to they can basically respond back to you and tell you the status of things. So if you ever wanted to look up what that is, here's the status codes. 200 is usually this default okay. Some of the other ones that you normally run into is 302 like found. That's usually a redirect, like when you log in and stuff like that. 304 not modified is usually when it's cached. And then, like I said, 404 is not found. And there's other ones, 403 forbidden, you might have ran into before. 500 is another big one that runs into just a giant server error or internal server error. So it's good to kind of know and understand how those work. Um, so we need to look at this a little bit more and understand what actually is happening under the hood here. Before we do that, we see our Nmap finished, so we'll see if we got any more information from there real quick. So we see, again, we got a version for SSH. We see OpenSSH 8.3. We see that they're Nginx 1.18. We do see it's powered by PHP 7.3.19. Again, this is good information to know. Same thing with the version number of Nginx. When we get into other situations later, we can see if there's exploits or anything like that that needs to run on those specifically. All right, so with that, where we're situated at right now, let's go ahead and on your default Kali installation, you'll have a generic burp community edition. I have a paid version. If you can spend the $300, I highly recommend it, especially if you're planning on doing any web application pen testing, things like that. Burp is definitely one of the cheaper tools, while it gives you the most value for what it does. And it's so versatile with the extensions and things like that that you can do so much with it. All right, it wants me to update it. I'm not gonna update it right now. We're just gonna open up a temporary project, click next, and just click start. And so what Burp does is it intercepts our traffic between our browser and the web server. And by doing that, we can see all the requests that happen, and then we can understand that a little bit more. When you first start up Burp, if it's your first time starting it, the first thing you'll notice is on the proxy and the intercept tab, this intercept is on. And what the intercept means is that anytime traffic sent to it on the proxy, which is set up as 8080, it's going to stop that traffic, let you inspect it, and potentially manipulate it if you need to before it gets sent on to the server. And then the server is just going to send it back to the proxy and then back to your browser. Um, so this usually holds most new people up to burp. It'll happen and you will not know that it's on. And I'll show you how that happens here in just a minute. What I'm going to go ahead and do is start up Firefox. We already have that started up, but I'm just starting up a new one. And I have installed an add-on called Foxy Proxy. And Foxy Proxy allows me to quickly adjust my settings for Firefox. And if you're looking for this and you're looking to add it to your browser, what you'll need to do is um, click on the hamburger menu and then click on add-ons and then type in Foxy Proxy. And that's going to search it and you'll see Foxy Proxy Standard. Once you install that in, you'll get a nice little icon here, and then you can click options and you can add a proxy basically. And in this case, I just added burp. I set that port to 8080 based on what we're doing here. And so now whenever I quickly turn this on, that'll show up. All right, so we'll go back to this page here. We'll turn on Foxy Proxy. And you'll see that the tab changed to color up here, and it says a name now. So if I reload this page, what you'll notice is that burp came up, and because of that, now we can see what's being sent from the browser to the server. And so we just click that forward. What we're telling now is, okay, burp, go ahead, send that on to the server, and then get your information back. And when we look back at the request and response, so in HTTP, I request a resource, and then the server responds back to me with whatever that is. And we'll see again in this case, what GoBuster was seeing is this 200 OK, and that 200 OK again is telling us that the server is just responding with that, saying, yes, there's a page available, here it is, even though it's a custom 404 page. And so that's kind of why GoBuster was not working right, or it's not going to work correctly, because all that's happening in the page is just literally saying, this is a 404, even though I'm giving you a 200 back. So while we look at this, we're looking at details of what the server's sending back to us, right? Again, we can see the version information. We can also see that it's powered by PHP. And then we also see that it's setting cookies. It's setting a test cookie, and it's setting it as a domain of pwdharder.local. And this is an interesting idea, is that it thinks that the domain for this website should be pwd.harder.local. And we can test this by sending this to repeater and then looking at our request and saying, okay, here's the host that we normally would send, right? But let's change this to the host that it's trying to set the cookie for. And if we send that, we'll see that the page is changed. And you know, if you can't read HTML code very easily, if you look at render, well, it's supposed to render it, but um, we can see that we see a harder core password manager. We see that the page is completely different than what we saw here, where it was saying this custom 404 page right here. And so then that's telling us as a tester or a CTF player that we need to set our host system to recognize that IP address as that domain name. Um, and the way that you do that is editing your etc host file. So you have to be root to edit your etc host file. In this case, I'm already root, so I'm going to do nano etc host. And we're going to specify this IP address again. Oh, I got the host already there. So now what we're doing is we're telling our host system, when you look up pwd.harder.local, go ahead and just replace it with this IP address automatically. And now when we load this page up, if we turn off intercept here, we'll see that the page should load up if I did everything right, which apparently I did not. Another feature we could do too is that we could have it burp automatically replace this that IP address with that host. Um, Depending on how your DNS mapping and stuff works, um, you might run into this problem too. But with all your traffic being run through burp, it can basically add and replace things. So I'm going to add a match and replace here. We can look for a request header. What we're going to match on is that IP address. So if we look back at this here, we're going to copy that. And then we're going to have it replace that. So what burp's going to do is anytime it sees that IP address, it's in the request header, it's just going to replace that with the actual DNS name. Okay. We'll see that this rule's enabled here, and then now we should hopefully be able to load that. All right. Apparently it's going to make me a big liar tonight. Oh, I know what I'm doing wrong. We're still specifying the IP address, which doesn't help us, right? What we need to specify now is the DNS name. Did I misspell it? Yep, looks like I did. All right. So now the page loads up, and we see a password manager. We don't know any passwords. We don't have any users. Um, we really haven't got anything more information of this. We can go ahead and maybe start scanning a little bit deeper. We could change this to detailed port scan. And then what we'll try is some just standard um, username and passwords to always kind of try whenever you see these applications like this. So we're going to do a dash p dash. This is a specify all ports basically. We don't want to do any scripting scans yet or anything like that. We don't know of any additional ports. And we'll go ahead and specify this to be T5. Again, dash PN. We didn't, we deleted our output all formats. All right, so that looks good. Input list targets, P-P, output all formats, detail T5PN. Okay. All right, so for the web application, so whenever you see these generic applications, the first thing to do is look up if there's any, comments, anything like that. If there's a version or like a banner or something like that, go look at the documentation for it, see if that documentation has anything that says what the default banner is. You'll be surprised how many times you run into that where the admin just maybe set it up or dev just set it up, and it's the default admin and password. In this case, it's a custom page, right? Like we see that the title header is harder.court password manager. We don't see anything like generated by X or anything like that. So we need to try just some standard stuff like maybe user and user. Um, admin password. Admin. All right. So in this case, admin worked, but what we're not seeing is that we see extra security in place. Our source code will be reviewed soon. So that's weird. That's not really giving us much information. If we look at the source of the page, it's literally just that page. It doesn't have any other additional information. So we're not getting much information out of this page. So this could be just discerning. You really not sure what to do in this situation. We could try maybe go Buster on this and see if we get any further. So let's run that while we're playing around and thinking of ideas. So we got burp running in this window here. We'll keep that running just in case we need it later, but we'll go ahead and copy the options for Go Buster, and we'll just replace that with the actual URL now. Okay, so we're copy and pasting that comment, the URL. And what we're looking for is just kind of some indication of what direction to go, what if there's something else in here. And again, this is more indicative of kind of more CTF-y type stuff. I haven't seen this in the real world, to be honest, like this before, where a website will say we're working on something. Our source code is being reviewed. Nothing like that. Um, so we'll let that run, and then what we'll do is we'll talk about some other things. So um, when you look at this, you start kind of thinking about what's called the kind of DevOps process. And for a dev team to deploy something, they usually use version control. And version control involves Git. And if you, I've written an article about this. It was one of the ways that I hacked the Mr. Robots creator, basically. So what had happened is that the Mr. Robot creator said, "Hey, there's a cool new my new website. Check this out." Um, and if you ever followed Mr. Robot's TV series and when they would release the website for the season, there was all these Easter eggs in the season's page, and it was really cool because you could get see some behind the scenes stuff, you could see some other things. So I thought this was one of those attempts at him kind of maybe putting out his new website, but there's Easter eggs in the website. And so one of the common things that you learn to start doing as you scan through all these websites, and if you're doing bug bounties or anything like that, is always, always, always look for Git, the Git directory on the main page. And the reason for that is if they did any source code revision, 80% of the time, what's going to happen is that they're going to log into their web server, they're going to do a Git clone from wherever their repository is at, and basically that's going to be where their web page is at. So if you read through this article, what you'll notice is if we try .git/config, you'll see the configuration for Git on the website there. And so let's just briefly try this, right? And we get a file. So this is an indication that they use Git to kind of deploy to the server. And it created all these background files that if you don't do permissions correctly and you don't set up things right, that's pretty bad, right? And so the tool that I used whenever I found this was Git Dumper, and so again, knowing this tool and using this tool from before, you just kind of go back to the same type thing, and this one here was part of Git Tools, so I looked up a different Git Dumper whenever I was looking up for this room, and this one works really good too. So let's see what we can get out of this. We'll still let GoBuster run, see if we find anything. So I'm moving up in a new window. I'm gonna go git clone. All right. So if we look at Git Dumper, you need to install the requirements, and then you should be able to run it. It just basically says do the website.git, and then specify the website you would like to put the output into. Okay. Um, so we'll need to cd into Git Dumper. Look at that. Um, Now, again, if you're up to date on your Kali, then it should be pip3. So make sure you're doing pip3. The instructions do say pip, and sometimes pip will mean pip3, but it's always better to specify pip3. Um, we'll pip3 install r, and then so it's basically reading that requirements text file and then just installing all the additional packages that this software needs, basically. Once that's done, we now should be able to run it without any issues. So we'll do git dumper. Going back to the website, we see that we need to specify the location of wherever Git's at and then the website. So in our case here, we know that this is going to be this right there. Take that off, and then we're just going to say we'll put this in the current directory and call it website. So what GitDumper is doing on the back end is similar to what we were just doing before, right? It's requesting a web resource and then downloading it. If the page gives it a 200, then it's just downloads that information. If it gives us a 404, that basically tells from the web server side that it's not there and to move on. Um, and so we can see the different things. So like if we requested, we can copy this link right here, and you'll see that if we do the same thing, it's opening up a page. And this, what this is, if you look at this file, it's the head data of a GET request. And we'll look at it here in just a minute in code when we're looking more in depth this. So this has downloaded all this source code for the page now. Um, and what you need to do whenever you get access to a GET page is kind of again look through the versioning and the source and stuff like that. I'm trying to see if I pointed it out here. Yeah, so git dumper. I'm showing you off git dumper here. Yeah, and then I try to verify with them if it was actual, like if they meant to do this. You can see the source code for the page. Um, this tells you how to basically kind of prevent this from happening, and then some advice to bug hunters. So yeah, so scan for sensitive directories, but also include the .git in there, which again is not included in directory list, which I thought was interesting, as it should be. All right, so this is not covering how to look at Git stuff, but when we look at Git, what you want to look at is the Git log. And the Git log is every time as a software developer, I make an update to the software, I do a commit. And the commit takes the differences between my last commit and this commit and makes it into almost like a package. And so what you're looking here is at a historical reference of what has been done to this website up to this point. And so we can see stuff like improved directory listing detection, disable TLS verification, merge pull request 1, disable unverified HTTPS warning, um, so on and so forth. So that's helpful. Sometimes you can see where a developer might have messed up or things like that. Um, let's look at the actual code of what we have and see if we have anything. So if we look at the website code, we can see that there is a couple of files here. We have an auth, we have an Hmac, we have an index. Index is the page that we're hitting. So let's look at index first. So I'm going to load that up into code. This is Visual Studio Code. I like Visual Studio Code. User data dir equals temp. All right, so we give it a couple seconds here. Visual Studio Code's done its highlighting now. All right, and what we're looking at is the index page. This is the page that we're seeing when we're looking at this right here. This page right here this is the source code for this page. So we see a session start in PHP that just basically starts like a session type identifier. Then we see require auth.php. We need to look at that. Then we're loading up a new login class and assigning it a variable. That's what the star login is. And then the new is the new, and then the login is a variable. Then we're using that reference to that login class to call authorized. And then we're requiring Hmac, and we're requiring credentials PHP, and then we're just displaying a page. All right. So let's look at these other files here. We're going to go ahead and pull in both of these. So we'll look at auth first, since it's the first one to be called. We also need credentials, which we did not get credentials. Doesn't look like it was part of our pool. So as part of auth, we see that they're defining a login username admin, login password admin. That's why admin admin worked. We see that once you log in, it says you've been logged in successfully, or it can provide basically some banner information, things like that. There's your class login. So this login class that we were calling. There's the function authorized, so you can see that what we're doing is we're uh, asking if this cookie is set. If it's not, then we're going ahead and setting it. We see that they're MD5ing this prefix post pass. They're hashing the password with the salt prefix. The prefix is login underscore. So that's where it's basically salting the cookie. Setting the session. If it needs to clear it, it's clearing it. Checking the password. There's the check MD5. And then it looks like you're getting some kind of HTML code here. Yep. And then it's calling the form, and there's the form there. Enter your username, enter your password, and then exit in PHP. All right, and then the next one is Hmac. So in Hmac, we see here that if we issue a GET request, if we have an empty GET H or an empty GET host, then we do the 400 bad request missing GET parameter. We require and we die on that if we basically are not getting that. And then, so since we're setting our, no, we're not setting a, yeah, we are setting a host. So we're good. We're passing that. So that's why we are getting this extra securities in place page here, because we're setting that host header. And you see that basically, so gets look at everything kind of sent to the server. So here's a get, and here's the request. And again, we have that host, and we're setting that host header. So then we're requiring secret PHP, but we don't have access to that, so we don't know what that is. If is set get n secret equals hashmac SHA-256 get n secret. HM equals hashmac 256 SHA-256 get host secret. So it's referencing a secret.php we do not have access to. And then what we're doing is we're seeing this extra security check failed. This is the error message that we're getting currently. So we see this extra security in place. Our source code will be reviewed soon. We're not seeing where that's being posted. Let's see if that's somewhere here. It is not. So maybe it's in the credentials.php that we don't have access. We can find source code. Yeah, so it's got to be in that other one file that we don't have. So Hmac is basically saying if we're supposed to specify two parameters to kind of fill in this information. We're supposed to specify n, and we're supposed to specify h. But let's look at what Hmac does. So if you've never have looked at PHP code before, um, the website's pretty good about that stuff. Did I? I totally took it off. All right, cool. Good job. All right, let's go PHP Hmac and hash Hmac. Sorry, hash Hmac. So PHP.NET has its own manual. This is a manual for every function within PHP, and this gives you the call functions and things like that. So again, you can kind of reference this and use this as a way to understand more in depth what's going on. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull up this function and we're going to see how it's being called in the actual code, and then figure out if there's issues with this, right? And so we see for Hmac, our first parameter is the algro, and then the data, which is getting n, whatever n we can provide n. That's something that we provide via get variable, and then string key, bool raw output false. So we see that algro needs to be a named hash algorithm, MD5 SHA-256. The message to be hashed, and then a key. We do not have that secret key. Again, the secret key is something that was maybe provided by secret.php, so we do not have that. But if we look at this, what it does, it returns a string containing a calculated message digest as lowercase hex edits unless raw output is specified to true, in which case it's a binary representation. Here it shows you an example. There's a quick brown fox, there's a secret, and that gives you a hash. And there's other functions to kind of give you different alternatives. Um, but then this is an interesting thing. So the reason that we want to um, look at this is people who use this functionality are able to document things that have problems, right? And so, like for Hmac, it's a hash, right? We're generating a keyed hash value using the Hmac method. What the Hmac method is, it's going to be a giant math formula on how to figure out things. We can look it up real quick and give like the 20-second version of it. But hashes are, think of them as one-way functions that I put something into this and uh, I always get the same value out unless I change the salt every time. That's the whole reasoning for a hash. Um, so yeah, here's a cryptography. It's a hash message authentication code. Um, and talks about SHA-1, SHA-2. There's the mathematical formula for it. Again, a very high level type stuff. Uh, but again, with all hashes, what it is I'm putting in an input. In this case, they're allowing you to have an algorithm. You pick whatever algorithm that's going to be. And the algorithm, again, is specifying how it does that hashing, the data to be hashed, and then a key. Um, so in this case here, what we're more interested in is the problem with this. And it's saying that if you specify a blank parameter for this second value here, it'll null out and basically just keep going. And that's not documented. And so that's a big problem, right? So now we're starting to get into okay, that's interesting. How do I do something with this type thing? Um, another value that we see here is that we can also get from host, and we're taking that plus the secret hash that comes from here and using that. So when you're wanting to play with hash values and you don't have much experience, what I suggest is CyberChef. And the reason for CyberChef is that you can input a value, and this basically will have these hashing, or they call it, encryption and coding. And what we're looking for is Hmac here. Let me make this bigger so it can be easier to see. So the hashing function that we want to use is SHA-256. The key, we don't know the key yet. What we want to kind of do is keep that key blank, and that's based on that PHP information here. So if we can keep the second parameter blank, right? That's going to be the data. And when we look at this here, we can specify that data. And so this should then just give us the secret. So let's try this. We know the host, we know a blank. All right, so sorry, I'm jumping around. So if that's our host, or do we need to specify that as a key? One sec, I got this saved, and I was gonna see what this is. Okay, yeah, so we're wanting a blank key and input of whatever host that we want. So SHA-256, that should be right. All right. So if we're looking back at what we're trying to do now is we're trying to craft this information to go in here, right? Like the data that we're going to provide is going to be null, which is this key here. And looking at the source code, we're getting in, and we don't know the secret, and that's going to take blank, what we're providing it, the blank key. And it's going to hash all that and put that into secret. And then that secret's going to be assigned down here, and we're going to assign this host value, which is what we're testing for here, and we need to specify what the hash would be. And that's what it's looking for, get h. So we need to provide a variable of n, we need to provide a variable of host, and we need to provide a variable of h. So n, h, and host. All right. I know it's a lot to follow. All right, so we're gonna do index.php was what we had before. Now we're specifying variables, so we put in a question mark. The first variable that we were specifying is n. This is right here, n, get n. We want to have a blank array to be put in there, and that's based on this information that we saw from this PHP function right here. Let me go back here. So right here is that we're putting in this blank function. So we're going to have the array equal 1. Okay. And then when you're specifying another variable, you use the and symbol. And we're going to specify host. So we need to specify the host header. And again, this is the host that we pick this host. We could pick whatever we want. But whatever you pick needs to hash correctly. And so that's why we use CyberChef here, is that this is the input plus the key gives us this output, and this is the hash. Okay, and then now we need to specify the hash. That should be this hash here. And so we see here hm equals get h, which hm is equal to the host header plus the secret. The secret is from this, and we specified the get equals n there. All right, so if we did everything right and I didn't mess up, then the security check failed. So I did something wrong, like always. All right, let's see what I messed up on. Did I get the hash wrong? Dun 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 dun. Further.local. Alright, what am I specifying, right? I'm gotta be messing up something. And equals host. Okay. I think this has to be that PWD. That's what we set this to, right? Cat Etsy host. Yeah, PWD. Alright. PWD there. Need to do PWD here. Oops. Alright, that should be the hash there. Alright, let me look at my notes. I have a different hash from when I did this earlier. Yeah. So this hash works. Let me see what I did differently. All right, so I did a pwn.harder.local. Still no key. You get out a hash here. And then again, you combine all this together. And that gets you the secret, basically. The host should... Let's load this through burp real quick. Yep. So it's just... Even though the host is specified as pwd, again, it's reading in that pwn.harder.local. And for whatever reason, either had something typed incorrectly before, or something was not set up correctly in CyberChef to give me the correct hash. So if you run into problems, that's probably what it is not having this input either correct. Because with hashing, if one thing's off, like even if I put a space here, we see that that number drastically changes. So just make sure whatever you're putting exactly in here gets copied into URL bar. All right, so with that, what we did get now is access to some kind of secret page, and let's look at this again. So now we see not much information, just a HTTP shell.harder.local. It tells us a username and a password in clear text. So again, we need to edit our etc host file to include this because we don't, our system doesn't know this information. So we'll put that in there. All right, and so then if we do an NS lookup now, of course it doesn't come back with something. So we'll have to probably change it in burp. We can give it a shot and see if it'll pick it up. So depending on your system, you might have issues with this. Again, depends on how your DNS reads. Mine, again, worked correctly. So we see a web shell. This is similar to what we saw earlier, though. So what we need to now put in is that username that we got and this password. All right, so now we're presented with an interesting thing. Your IP is not allowed to use this web service. Only 10.10.10.x is allowed. So most people would say, okay, they're looking at something and restricting requests to this, right? Um, I can't change my IP, so how do I get around this? And again, this is where the magic of burp kind of comes back into play again. We'll look at this request here. We'll send this a repeater. And what you'll notice, again, what we're doing is we have a host header. This is the one that we specified. But there's another header that you can add into web request, And it's kind of like acting, basically like when you're acting as a proxy, this is what you end up doing. And what it's called is it's called X forwarded for. And so X forwarded for forward it did for. And this specifies an IP address that it was supposed to be forwarded for, this request. And so if we do this, what we'll notice here is that that results in a different page. And that's what we're looking for, right? Um, so let's copy this and let's try to load this page up. We need to intercept this page now. So we'll turn on intercept. We'll go to the request. We'll load this page up again. Burp should come up. Okay. We'll add this into the web page and we should see, oh cool. So now we get a page. So this is great, right? And we can see what this is. So if we run who am I, again we get this request. If we click forward, oh, oh man. So we get this IP not allowed. And so this kind of goes back to earlier when we were adding those replace and request options here. So again, we replaced earlier that if the IP address is there, it should go to pound harder. We can turn this off now, right? Like we don't need this. What we can add is that for every request header, um, we just want to add a new header. And so this is going to add this header every time into our request as long as it's going through burp. And so now if we load this page, we need to turn off intercept. You'll notice that it already added it right there at the bottom. So now this is going to automatically basically add that header every time. Every time that we do something now. Every time it adds any page that it goes to, it's adding that. If we needed to filter that or specify certain web pages, again depending on certain functionalities and stuff like that, that's where you would need to do this match criteria and and really specify what host I'm looking for or things like that. So like, like if if I wanted to match just to shell dot harder dot local, then I could replace that, do a slash n, and then also add this x forwarded. And so again, this gives again Burp that super functionality to do this stuff on the fly and make it easier for you as you're doing pen testing type stuff. And this is one of the things you should test for when you're looking at admin type interfaces and things like that, is trying to do this X forwarded and then have it play through possible IP addresses that would normally not be internet facing, like the 10s and the 172s and the 192s and stuff like that. Um, it, look up private IP ranges, and those are the ones that you could try and see if you get a difference of response back from the server when you're looking at admin pages. Just to let you know that sometimes you can bypass the authentication too if it's X forwarded for a local host IP address. I've done that before. All right. So this is every person's, like web pen tester's dream. This is basically a built-in web shell. Like this is good to go. We can specify things. We can see where we're at. We can do a PWD, print working directory, or see we're in www shell. We can do an ID. We see that we're www. That's not the best, but let's see what else we have. What version are we on? We're in Unit Linux. All right, cool. Can you give us an all? Okay, looks like it's Linux. The box name, the version, derivative of Ubuntu, and x86 64. All right, so we're getting a little bit more information about that. Um, Usually, again, this is where I start to like to kind of use the tools that I'm used to, right? And this is one of the tools is linpeas. So again, if you're new to this, uh, linpeas is for when you get access to a system. Uh, it basically is looking for Linux versions of privilege escalation. Um, it, so this is part of the privilege escalation awesome suite. It has a Windows and a Linux version. Um, I've already downloaded this on my system. So what I'm going to end up doing is just hosting that. So let's go ahead and clear our command prompt off. In my version of Kali, again, I've already downloaded this. So you will need to download this. This is not a standard tool on Linux, um, but you can git clone that privilege escalation awesome suite. And once you're in there, again, you'll look at linpeas, and then this is the directory where I'm at. So if I want to host this, right, go ahead and start getting into the habit of using Python 3, or we're going to call Python 3 module, http.server, and this is going to be basically serve up an HTTP server page on port 8000. If you specify the port, you can change that, right? And so we're going to use this web shell now to go ahead and pull this page down, and so I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller here. I'm going to split this window too because I need to grab my IP address real quick. And so ifconfig ton 0. All right, so that's me there. All right, we can close that now. All right, so if we ls on that folder, we see that we have an auth, ID, IP, and vendor. So now we're going to do a wget. We're going to do HTTP. You can see that I've kind of somewhat done this before. Specify that port and then specify linpeas.sh. So again, this is going to reach out to my server. You see that reaching out here, and it downloaded that file onto that local directory there. So now if we look at this, we will see that linpeas is downloaded. Okay, so let's go ahead and change linpeas to executable. So we're going to do a chmod plus x, and we'll do a ./linpeas.sh. Okay, so that should change, add the executable bit to it. And we can verify that again by an ls-al. And so now we see that the plus x is on there. And so that just basically added the executable right to all the permissions throughout linpeas there. So we're going to go ahead and try to run linpeas. The best way to do this is to run it and then pipe it into T, and T is going to basically show you the output while saving that output to a file. And so we're going to save this out. We're going to try to save this to output.out. Just again, you can name this any file. It doesn't matter. But T will basically, the command shows you the output while it's writing to that file. And then that's a cool way to kind of do both at the same time. So we're going to execute this. We'll see what we get, right? So this might take a little bit, and the reason again is linpeas is pretty big, right? So we can see that it's running through all its information. We see that there's no sudo found. Um, there's your mounted drives, some users. We see a supervisor group of php-fpm. AppArmor is not installed. The reason this looks a little bit weird is because in the normal version, it does some colorization, and that's how it does this colorization is by specifying these special characters. So that's why you see these, um, you know, 1:34M, whatever, and things like that. And that's kind of the reason that we basically put it to an output.text. We could try to push that output text to us. All right, so we see a lot of ports open here, 8080. Some indications. Sudo L without password. Doesn't look like that's happening. All right, so a lot of information. It's a little bit harder to read in this format here. So let's see if we can get a better grasp on this, right? Like we have a command shell. Can we get a better terminal session? Something a little bit more manageable than this, right? So we can first look at maybe our home directories and see if there's an SSH key available to us. So the first thing, whenever you get access to a system and you want a little bit more or more on depth there, is that you can call it a reverse shell. We could do that here too. We'll hang up the web server doing it, but let's execute this, see if we can get a straight SSH shell instead of having something call back to us. So again, we're using the native tools to kind of do that instead of like um, making a service do it, if that makes sense. So we see that there's two directories here. We're doing an ls-al/home. We see an evs and a www. So again, we remember we logged in as EVS, so we can see if they have anything in their directory that we can read. There is a user.txt. It looks like that based on the permissions, we could probably read that. So we could try that. All right, so we can read the user.txt. That's great. We'll copy that out. We'll save that for somewhere later. It's not going to help us right now. We need to get access to the system, right? Um, another, the thing that we're looking for again is like an SSH directory, something that kind of tells us that we can SSH into here. So we don't see a .ssh for this directory here. We also had www. Www doesn't have anything. They do have a .gnupg, which is interesting. And again, these are these hidden directories that you would know about. So something tells me that if you could enumerate this GNUPG, and looks like we could get a pub ring from this too. So I almost wonder if you could do, let's see here. So pawn harder, no, or was our original page? Do, 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 do. Yeah, pawn harder, PWD. Yep, and then can we do, we got this here. Okay, so this is a more actual 404 page. And then let's see if we actually can pull up that page. And so what we're doing here is we're verifying the web directory, but we're also getting a little bit more in depth and pulling information here. All right, so that's not pulling that there. Let's try the shell page and see if that would give it to us from there. I'm gonna think that it's going to. So nope. All right. So it looks like it was just only accessible via the web page. All right, so we got a pub ring, KBX, a trusted DB. Again, no SSH shell that to help us. All right, so we have access to the system. We can upload stuff to the system, um, but we kind of want to get a little bit more, like a more shell access, more actual thing that we can see on there. We know the servers run in PHP, and again, so this kind of runs into the people's differences of opinion and what to do or not to do type situation. I'm always for using Metasploit. Um, I think again, it's a tool. It's there and it's there for a reason. Um, huh, interesting. Port 2's open. That must have been some kind of fluke or something. We can see GoBuster still going for pawn harder, so it's probably not going to find much there. So let's let's generate a Metasploit PHP shell and see if we can get a little bit more output, even if we just download our output .text to kind of see more of like what actual information came back. We could also copy output.txt into a text file on our system and then look at it that way. Um, Here, let me just show you both of those methods, right? So we'll just open up a new text editor. We do have this web shell, so we could do ls, we could do cat output dot output. Okay, so that should be that. So then we just need to copy all this information. If it's not cutting it off, then we should be able to get everything. And then what you can do is cat this on your own box, and you should be able to see the colorization and kind of help you point you in the right direction here. Again, what we're looking for is a way to kind of get either like a shell access or more privilege access in this system here. Still going. We can see that it picked up those get. There's a shell there. Wrong location. So there's some interesting gotchas that look like that we missed, which is good. All right, so I copied that. I'm gonna paste that here. Yep, looks like it saved all the color coding. That's fine. Awesome. So we're gonna do a file, save as. We'll put this in our harder directory and we'll just call this output.output too. Output.output. Okay. So now if we go to our terminal, let's not use this one. Let's go back to our other terminal here. We can now count output.output and look at that, all the nice colorization there. All right, so let's look at this and see if this gives us a little bit more information. So again, the great thing about LinPs and the whole reason that we wanted that colorization is that the colors kind of point you in the direction that you need to go, right? And so red and yellow will tell you that this is something that you highly should look at. This is the most likely way that you're going to get privilege escalation. Red is saying, hey, look at this. Light blue is users with console. Dark blue is users without console. Green is common things that are usually on most systems. So if we look at this, what we see here then is We're getting some information, and it looks like we're in a Docker container, okay? So off the bat, we know that we're in a Docker container. We also know that ASLR is enabled. So if you're going to do any exploiting, you have to deal with that. Useful software, NC, like Netcat, or wget, or curl, or ping, or base64, or Python 3, and PHP. All good stuff to know. Here's our processes. We see that Python 3 is working. We have a PHP a FPM. There's our output command that we ran. So nothing really big there. Cron Jobs. So we need to look at the cron jobs. Formatting's messing up a little bit here and there. Active ports, we see a 9,000. Okay, some users and groups. We do see our EVS user. Nothing else kind of pops out there. We do see some configuration files. It does permit a root login via SSH. That's awesome. We don't see any certs or anything that looks like to get us there. So we do see a pseudo bit file. We do see some SH files in path. Okay, so that's something interesting that we might want to look at. Oops. Unexpected folders in root. It's a dub. We do see some GNU PG files, which again we looked at earlier. Backup files. So there is a backup file in Etsy periodic. So we'll need to go look at that. That can be executed as www, which is us. So that's more likely the way. Readable files. Lots of readable files. So this is all that www directory. We can see the password manager there. There's the secret PHP. So we got to go look at that secret PHP now that we have access to it. Not like it really matters at this point, but you know, if you want to kind of dive into it a little bit more and see how that all worked, there's where it's at, right? Wrong location index. Wonder what wrong location does. So if we had shell, wonder how we would get that wrong location. We'll not worry about it right now. All right, so the big thing that stands out to me currently is that this EVS backup file, right? So we still have our web shell that we can use. I say let's get a console, some kind of actual console version, something running. We did see Netcat is available, so we could use Netcat. So do. All right, so we have a choice here, right? Like we could run Netcat and this will hang up the web shell, which is fine because once we kill it, it'll be fine. We could upload a Meterpreter PHP and then spawn a Netcat off of that. Again, that then kind of allows us to still have access via the web server if we need to. Um, again, it's your preference here, right? Like how hurt would you be if you lose your only access to the shell? So I like to keep this shell. So I'm going to do Meterpreter and then spawn Netcat that way. Again, I like to keep my access that I have. I don't want to burn that bridge. So we're going to, on the top window here, we're going to do msfdb run. This is going to start up Meterpreter, or Metasploit, sorry. All right, so we're going to use exploit multi-handler. Okay. You notice now Metasploit kind of automatically configures a generic shell reverse TCP. Again, in this case, that's not going to work for us. We need to specify a payload. In fact, we're going to specify the PHP payload. If it let us, there it goes. PHP interpreter, and we'll have it do reverse TCP. Show options, and we see that we just need to specify an L host and an L port. Okay. So we'll set L host to be 0.0.0. L port's fine. And then we need to generate the shell, right? So that's going to be an MSF Venom. You specify the payload. This is the same payload that you selected up here. So this is going to be the exact same thing. You want to copy and paste this almost. And the reason I say you want to copy and paste this is because in Metasploit, if you don't know, there's stage and stageless um, payloads. Um, and I always confuse them up, but the way that you tell the difference is something like this where it says PHP slash interpreter slash reverse TCP is one version, where the other version is an underscore interpreter, um, interpreter underscore reverse underscore TCP. And so that, again, if you don't specify that specific way, when it tries to call back to you, it doesn't know how to do that, and so it just ends up having a problem. The L host that we need to specify for this payload is again going to be us, but we need to tell that what that is, and that is going to be not ton 9, it's going to be ton 0. Alright, and then L port, and we're going to just go ahead and leave it as the default 444. Alright, and then we're going to spit that out to MSF rev.php. Alright, so if we have everything here, show options, that looks good. We're going to go ahead and set exit on session as false. This way, if we need to load up the page again, it will not kill off our listener. And then we're going to exploit -j. Alright, it looks like MSF Venom is finished up with generating our payload. And so if we look in here, we should have now an MSF rev PHP. What I suggest is that you look at this. What MSF Venom has done on these is it puts a comment on that first part of the code there when it's loading PHP. And so we're just going to load this into there, and you'll see that we have that there. If I turn on Control Z, we can see now everything's color coded correctly, and it looks like we should be good to go. Okay, we'll go ahead and save that. And so now we need to get this onto the server and then execute it, just basically going to the web page. So since we have the listener ready to go. Okay, all right, so we'll clear here. We're gonna do a Python three http.server. Okay, so that should host that now. MSFrev.php. All right. MSFrev.php. Okay, so that should get the PHP server from our server. if we do, again, an ls-la, that will show us that that is available on the server now. And so then all we need to do is navigate to it. So if we do that here, we see that our interpreter session is open. Great. So now we have um, a console access to this. And we can see if we do an ls, we see our directories and stuff like that. Again, this is where we could have pulled our output file, things like that. We can run our post modules and things like that, but uh, and honestly, what we really want is to look at the file that we kind of identified earlier when we looked at our privilege escalation script. And so if we go back to that, we see we want to look at this etc periodic 15-min EVS backup. So let's cat that out. Let's see what this is. And this way it'll give us a little bit better way of kind of looking at this now. All right, so it is to create a backup script that saves the www directory to our internal server for authentication. Use SSH with the user EVS and the password this. Okay, so it's not a script. What it is it looks like it was meant to be a script where they put in a username and password. So awesome. So we can just do SSH EVS at, we can use any one of the hosts that we already have. Um, so we paste in that password and we're logged in. All right. So we're a different user now. We, again, in the user context, we do see this as Alpine, which is a different version of Linux, probably that most people are not used to. So it uses the ASH shell instead of the bash shell. So there might be some quirkiness or things like that to worry about. We ran RenPs before, and some of the things that kind of stood out with us a little bit was some of these scripts that were available to us as a user. Let me find them here in just a minute. So again, it looked like we're in a Docker container. Not sure if that's still the case. We could run linps again and just basically get a new output as our current user. And sometimes you will see different things like that. There's also the Docker environment. That's how another way that you know you're inside of a Docker container. So there we go. .sh files in path run cryptid. And then we have also up there execute cryptid. So let's look at these files and see what these are. All right, so it looks like it's gonna figure out the current user. Who am I? This command only runs commands which are encrypted for root at harder local using GPG. Create a file like this, echo and who am I command, encrypt the file and run the execute cryptid. So we need to encrypt whatever commands that we want to run. We can see that it's exporting root .gmpg. So it's looking at that and then running it as that. So this script must have permissions to do that then. So if we look at this, yep, we can see that it's group, but it set up as the group EVS. So that's a definitely way to kind of get execution on here. And let's look at this execute cryptid. All right, and so that looks like it's just some kind of executable or something to kind of do something with this. Yeah, there's a SO file interpreted in there. It's an ELF binary, it looks like. Okay. All right. So in order to, let's see if we can clear this out. There we go. In order to execute something, we need to have the key based on the information that we just saw, right? So if you never did GPG before, you can list out your keys and see whatever keys that you have. Um, and keys are, like a key based onto a user, things like that. We see that this user did not have one. We do see similar files from earlier when we were playing with the dub, but we don't have those. So what we need to do is see if we can find any keys on the system. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do a find. We're looking for an all.public keys. Usually that's um, kind of what they're named when they're public versions of the keys. The private keys would be great too, but more likely you'll find public keys. And so we look at these, you'll see the public keys for the Alpine distribution. This is how the software was signed when it was installed. We also see a var backup root at harder.local.pub. So that's probably the key that we're looking for. Again, we see some APK keys here. Again, these are part of the repo installations, and then your SSH host pub keys and stuff like that via for your SSH host. Again, this is an Etsy SSH host, not in any of the others. So we found a public key that we want to import. So we're going to do GPG, and then we're going to do a dash dash import. And then we just need to specify that key. All right, so you see that we imported that key now. And because now we have the imported that key, we can sign things similar to like it was telling us before, right? And let me split this window again. I don't want to kill out my interpreter shell in case we need to get back in. We're just going to move that up there. We're going to take this. We're going to split this again. Okay. All right. So we saw earlier based on linps that we had certain commands available to us. And one of those was netcat, right? So if we did which netcat, uh, we see that it is available. My box is going to expire, so let me go ahead and just up that up real quick before we expire. Turn off burp and do that. All right. Almost done with it. All right. Based on that earlier command, what we can do then is that we can basically put what our commands are going to be into a text file and then encrypt that, right? And when we encrypt that, it's going to then execute and whatever we tell it to, and then call back to us. So we're gonna have it generate a reverse shell using netcat, right? Let's do port 4555. We want to do a dash E, and again, because this is Alpine, it's not going to be dash bin bash. It's going to be dash uh, E bin ASH. And so that's a big distinction that might trip some people up. So we put that command into the CMD file. So if we cat CMD, we see that that's in there. Okay. And now we need to encrypt this with that key that we had. We're going to tell GPG that the recipient is root at harder, and that was the key that we imported earlier, and that we need to encrypt CMD. Oops, CMD. All right, am I not typing great? Copy and paste this. All right, there we go. So the thing it said is that it is not certain that this key belongs to a person named in the user ID. If you are really know what you're doing, then just say yes. So it's showing you the public key of this person and the you're using their key to kind of sign that. If you've never used GPG before, what it is it's a way to kind of encrypt and uncrypt things. Again, using public and private keys. Um, in a normal case, this is a sign or to encrypt emails and things like that, or encrypt files. And this would be checked up against a registry of keys. Because we imported this directly and it didn't come from a registry and it's not checking against a registry, this is what it's telling you. It doesn't know that this person is for sure who they say they are. So, take that with a word of caution, whatever you're doing. So now we have encrypted this. We need to, before we execute it, we need to go ahead and LVNP, and we want to do port 55555. And so now we're ready, we're listening, right? And then we're going to execute encrypted that GPG command. So we'll see that this saved our command as GPG. And if we cat that, it just looks like garbled, right? Garbled mess. But because it's encrypted. All right. So let's um, let's do the executed command now. And based on that, we should execute this command, right? CMD. And we see that we got the connection here. And if we do an ls, we see that we are there. We do have some kind of shell. If we do an ID, we do see that we're root. So now this is how we got a privilege escalation. Um, and we can now read the root file. That's it. So really cool, kind of interesting box. As far as some realism, uh, some of the things were definitely real. The Git directory was definitely real. Um, I've ran into that a couple of times. Again, I wrote an article with it on it with the Mr. Robot hack and stuff. So that's it's definitely there. It's definitely available. Definitely always check it for your bug bounties, things like that. This is that's definitely going to help you with that. But that's the room. that's the way to kind of walk through it and get through all the hard challenges there. I appreciate everyone for sticking for the video. If you like it, feel free to subscribe, and thanks and have a good night.